You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis. I'm host of BioTalk, which interviews leaders within the BioHealth Capital Region who are focused in the biohealth industry. Today, our guest is Jeff Galvin, CEO and founder of American Gene Technoloogies. Jeff, welcome to BioTalk.
Thank you, Rich. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I've been wanting to interview you for a long time. I've seen you speak many times. I think I know the story, but you can tell it better than I can. But we're going to first tell the listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into the biotech industry.
Well, it is a little bit unusual, actually. So I am a computer scientist by training. And at a very young age, I saw computers and I got very excited by them. And we're talking about in the 70s. I was looking at a teletype that was attached to a mini computer. And when I learned how to program for the first time, I just thought this is going to be incredibly valuable, powerful, and world-changing, this whole idea of computers and software. And I think that was sort of the birth of my career as a technologist. So I did end up teaching at MIT and Harvard and then getting recruited by Silicon Valley. And my first job in Silicon Valley was not that exciting to me because it was about the programming and not about technology and how it improves lives. But then I went to Apple, and that was just absolutely the perfect place to learn how technology not only changes lives, I think I knew that already, but how to go ahead and create a revolution where you can get a powerful new thing out to the public.
What year was that, Jeff?
That was in the early 80s. That was the days where we used to see Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak walking around the campus barefooted and interacting with them all the time, and all the executives that are long gone from there. But it was the real Wild West days of Apple. We saw $100 million a year in sales, and then $250 million a year in sales, and then $1 billion a year in sales. And all that happened over a 3-year period.
Pretty exciting.
It was extremely exciting. And it was the kind of place where they just said, here's an expense account and, go forth and spread the gospel of the graphic user interface, which was revolutionary. And gene and cell therapy are revolutionary as well. And so that was actually not a bad experience. So what got me into biotech? Well, I retired in Silicon Valley after a number of different successes, and I didn't need any more money. And so I took some time off. And I got bored, and I thought, I'll just dabble in tech again. Maybe I can mentor some people or sit on a board or whatever. And business plan. People heard I had money and business.
You're
plans.
Still in the Valley at this time.
Still in Silicon
Okay.
Valley. So there's business plans coming over the transom. People looking for money, and I met through one of the business plans that came to me. The person who was pitching the idea introduced me to Roscoe Brady at NIH here in Bethesda, Maryland. And he showed me viral vectors, and I had the same aha moment when I saw that as the first time I saw computers. I just realized, this is going to be world changing. As a matter of fact, right on the spot, I just said to him, somebody's got to be the Microsoft of this industry, that this is the programming industry for the next 100 years. I've been in the one that has been around for 80 years so far, and I've had a 40-year career in it. But this is the one where if you get involved in this, you have job security and you'll be producing things for the next 100 years. I don't think he understood the Microsoft comparison, and I don't think many people understand the Microsoft comparison. But the bottom line is that I understood that now that we can tweak DNA, and this was all based on how he described viral vectors to me, he made me understand that your DNA, even as a fully formed adult, no longer has to be seen as being static and unchangeable. And I knew enough from my high school biology that I realized, the reality that if we can get in there and we can tweak your operating system, we could iron out a lot of bugs. Cancer could be eliminated this way. We could replace missing genes and eliminate genetic problems. We could even attack infectious disease and viruses. And so there's a lot of comparisons between this and my old industry of programming, and I think over time everybody's going to get this. But that's what brought me here. And I just see this immense opportunity that this region is the place to do it, that this is where a lot of these technologies were born. It's where there's a lot of trained people that are involved in it. And so I decided I'll come out here, start a company. Company was like a snowball rolling downhill. All of a sudden it needed a CEO. I was in love with this stuff. Here I am working 16-hour days again.
What year was that, Jeff?
That I came out here?
Yeah.
So I met Roscoe Brady in 2007. So I've been in gene and cell therapy for 11 years now. I like to joke that even though I'm not a trained biologist or molecular biologist or PhD, but I am one of the most experienced gene and cell therapy CEOs on the planet. 11 years in this with, again, just a vision that was born on that day when I met Roscoe Brady and he showed me this stuff, and that is starting to play out. It's just an extremely exciting thing to be part of.
So after you had this aha moment with Roscoe Brady, how long did it take for you to actually execute what you thought was, getting the technology out of NIH? Or how did that work? What was the interaction like with working with NIH about 11 years ago?
So it turned out that Roscoe Brady was about to retire. It was a combination of a number of different things that sort of put him in a position where it only made sense to retire, even though he had an extremely active mind and a whole bunch of different ideas of things that he could do with viral vectors. So his research was going to go on the scrap heap. And I was like, can we have it? And they were like, yep, here you go. Now, that was the cheapest license ever out of NIH. And they were just glad to have some of their postdocs hired and move on.
So how long did it take to negotiate the license agreement back then?
0. It just was coincidental.
Oh, it was coincidental?
Yeah. So what happened was that I said to their licensing people, I'm interested in continuing this. What's the story? And they were like, great, continue it. And we actually looked at something that they were in the process of patenting that they had abandoned. And I was like, I think you have abandoned probably one of the most important discoveries ever in healthcare. Can we somehow reactivate it? And they said, if you reactivate it, you'll have to license it from us, but we'll cooperate in that. And we looked into it, and then I decided that if that was in the public domain, there was still layer and layer and layer to put on top of that I wouldn't have to pay for. And so why complicate my life? So we ended up getting all sorts of free R&D from NIH and the most advanced viral vector platform on the planet in 2007. And we spent the last 10 years enhancing that.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's what a lot of listeners would like to learn about, is the process of actually identifying something that's world-changing and then going through the process in a bureaucratic environment, which people think is extremely bureaucratic, and actually executing a license that is really the basis for your corporation today.
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways to start a company. And this grew organically in a way that might be very different than the starts of many of these companies. And there's this spectrum of origin stories and this spectrum of strategies to get from point A to point B that is so variable that I believe that the key elements in success don't really boil down to the right technology and the right license and things like that. I think it boils down to the right people being all drawn together by a vision and a passion for something and storytelling. So I think that we're a unique backstory that maybe has some lessons that it can illuminate in terms of just accelerating a company, but may not be a blueprint for every company out there. And it was my understanding of where this thing would go and my passion for it that just started attracting people that could make it happen. Because I can't do anything that we're doing in our lab. I can't build an internal combustion engine, but I can drive a car. And I can also explain to people why cars are useful and why we should all get together and build one. And so that is what is going on at this company. And there will be a lot of companies that will be born in a different way. There'll be a great technology that will be invented at a university. It'll be licensed. It'll get VC backing from day one. And it will create a great company that way. And what you can borrow from AGT will be this idea of having a vision and focusing people on that vision and attracting people that are passionate about that vision to do something that can be world changing, and that could accelerate any business.
So in essence, the analogy is you're the Steve Jobs of AGT, and Roscoe Brady was the Wozniak of AGT. And you're the storyteller, and he was the scientist who created the viral vectors.
So I'm really glad you said that instead of me, because it would have sounded totally different if I had started to suggest there was any parallel like that. But I think that I'd take one exception to what you're saying, and that is that Roscoe Brady was like the oracle that, not Oracle company, but the oracle that gifted us with this amazing just seed for this entire business. But the Steve Wozniak in this business is David Pauza. And yes, I say it privately all the time. I feel that I have an opportunity to be the Steve Jobs of this industry, and that this industry is even bigger than microcomputers, because healthcare is a $10 trillion a year industry today. All of high tech, all of the computers and everything related to computers, even down to smart speakers and thumb drives and stuff like that, is only about $3 trillion a year. So, this industry, if you can really make a difference, can actually even be bigger than that industry. But what enables me on the science side is brilliant scientists like David Pauza who were attracted to that vision. And I was lucky to have him come into my orbit and become interested in this. And, maybe somebody else would have come along, maybe not. Sometimes I just believe that this company also resulted out of serendipity, just a lot of luck and grabbing brass rings when they were presented.
So where did David come from, and how did you two come together?
He comes from University of Maryland.
Oh, that's great. Right in the BioHealth Capital Region.
That's exactly right. Yeah. He has 35 years in immunology, virology, cancer biology, and biology in general. And he worked at Salk, and he started the HIV initiative at the University of Wisconsin. He's got a long track record there. And then he came to Maryland when the Institute of Human Virology was formed. And he was there for over a decade. I'm not sure. It might have been like 15, 16 years. So we were doing an HIV project, and we thought, where's there some expertise that would give us credibility in the HIV space so we could get some grants from NIH? And voila, there was David Pauza, the perfect expert at the perfect time. And he wrote us a letter of support, and he acted as a consultant on the project, and we got a great result. And that intrigued him further. And it actually motivated him to introduce me to Bob Redfield, one of his colleagues at the Institute of Human Virology. And they just had a huge affection for our approach to HIV and a big belief in it the same way that I did. So you see that this storytelling and this vision, once again, just happened to attract the resources to it because they felt the same way. And our raison d'etre was like a light that attracted moths that loved the same thing. So anyway, they came in here, and ultimately David decided, and I think Bob encouraged him as well, that he could do more to cure HIV at AGT than he could at the Institute of Human Virology, which is just amazing. And since then, he's come in here and he's solved a whole bunch of technical challenges that have brought that initial research and that initial result to the patient. And next year, we expect to do a human trial where we'll prove that HIV is curable, that we'll bring back cured HIV patients. And I got to say that I'm 99% confident of that, and not because I am great at biotech.
You're good at storytelling, though.
Yeah, I think I'm good at espousing the vision and motivating the people that can do this thing and attracting those people in and getting their commitment and their energy. And then the rest of the stuff has just happened because I've got this incredible team here in Rockville.
Well, I think one of the things you're reinforcing, which I was going to talk about later, is that there is a lot of talent in our backyard here in Maryland or in the region, and you don't have to go to the coast or some other place in the Northeast to be able to get the talent you need to advance AGT and some of the most sophisticated technologies in the world.
Absolutely. This area not only birthed this whole industry, I mean, think about almost everything that originated in this space was from government investment in understanding viruses. And a collateral benefit was that we found a way to repurpose viruses to have a therapeutic effect, to deliver new gene constructs and to change the behavior of cells. Doesn't mean that that can't grow anywhere, and there are great biotech centers all across the world. But, first, let's give a shout out to, the BioHealth Capital Region for having all of this basic science that is birthing huge industries, and this just being one of them. So, of course, this was the place to find these things in these nascent states, and I couldn't have picked up this technology in Silicon Valley where I was living, and I certainly couldn't have licensed it for zero, right? So the next thing is talent. Right. And we have 71 government-funded institutes, high-tech institutes that are doing basic research that are leaking technologies and trained personnel like 71 Xerox PARCs from where I came from. And remember, Xerox PARC birthed almost everything in Silicon Valley, besides HP, I guess.
Mm-hmm. In their garage.
Yeah. Then the next thing is that this is just a great place to live. I mean, I think Silicon Valley is a great place to live, especially if you have money. And I had a good career there and I had a good life there. But sometimes when I go back to visit my old stomping grounds and I ride down 101 and I realize not everybody has the great life that I have there. But when I ride around Montgomery County or Howard County or anywhere in Maryland, I go, there's a lifestyle here that's really good one for anybody. And same thing, you ride out through Virginia, and DC is a world-class city. I mean, this region has it all. And then the weather, well, I grew up in Boston. This is like Miami to me.
It feels like that today with the humidity about 90%.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. But that's a rare day
right,
down here.
Right.
This actually has a lot of good weather compared to Boston. It's not as good as Silicon Valley, but I'll tell you, the trade-off is definitely worth it. And then everything you do here is cheaper. So if I was renting this, we're in 25,000 square feet here of biotech space, lab and office. That would cost me 3 to 4 times as much in Silicon Valley. We're paying people really good wages for this area, and they're living great at about 50% of the cost in Silicon Valley. And so this is a great place to grow a company like this. It's not just the availability of the technology and the talent, it is the lifestyle. And the fact that you can have a highly motivated, happy workforce at a manageable cost and good space for them to collaborate in. And that, to me, is almost unique in this area. I don't think you can get it in Boston. I don't think you can get it in San Diego anymore. I don't think you can get it in San Francisco. But here, we're at the beginning of something really special.
We're speaking with Jeff Galvin, the CEO and founder of American Gene Technoloogies, and he just gave us the sales pitch for the BioHealth Capital Region, which we were going to ask for at the end of this interview, but we're only in the middle, and he's so excited about it, he couldn't wait. Right, Jeff?
Yeah, I didn't know that that's where this was intended to go, but I am always happy to say something great about this area because I just feel that way.
So let's go deeper into AGT right now. You mentioned HIV, but you actually have a pipeline of a couple things that AGT is working on beyond HIV. Let's give the listeners a little information about the other areas of research you're doing right now.
Sure. We have a broad platform of patented technologies or technologies that are in the patent process that enhance the usability of viral vectors and provide a bunch of different genetic constructs, these actual sequences of amino acids that do very important things in the body, right? And we can mix and match these things like a tool set to address a wide variety of diseases. And we have 3 main areas within the scope of this platform that we are focused on right now, but really the sky is the limit over the long term because the basic ability to go down and change the DNA in cells in a very targeted manner has almost unlimited capacity to not just cure things, but to enhance our lives in many, many different ways. So right now we're focused on infectious disease. So HIV is actually the lead program in an entire infectious disease space because we have made discoveries and we have patented technologies that are applicable in all different types of chronic viral infections. So we might go on to hepatitis B, human papillomavirus, Epstein-Barr, herpes, things like that, where there may be reasons why you need to mop these things up in somebody's body in order to avoid comorbidities of this low-grade infection. But we've made discoveries where we could move the needle in all those areas. HIV will be the first example of that.
So this is a platform technology which people need to understand.
Absolutely. The second part of the platform is monogenic diseases. This is in the sweet spot of all viral vector companies, and there are lots of them out there. And that is that there are 7,000 roughly, maybe even more, diseases that are what we call monogenic loss of function disorders. In other words, you have one broken gene and you're not making an enzyme or a protein somewhere in your body, and as a result, it manifests as a disease state. And these could be as benign as something like lactose intolerance, or it could be as serious as something like phenylketonuria, which is almost a death sentence, or familial dysautonomia, which is going to cripple you progressively over your life. And it all boils down to just one gene that's not expressing. Well, that's the whole idea behind gene and cell therapy, or let's say gene therapy in particular, and cell therapy is sort of an offshoot of that. We can now crack open deadly viruses that have been installing viral DNA for 1.5 billion years. We can scoop out the viral DNA, leaving an empty carrier like a stealth bomber that will deliver whatever we want. Then, a lot of your listeners may not realize how far this industry has progressed, but I can get on the internet and I can order any human gene. It'll come to me in a plasmid by FedEx. I can chop it out and I can go ahead and put it in that viral carrier, and I can start putting it in human cells. And we can develop drugs that replace those broken genes, restore that enzyme or protein, and the disease goes away. And this is what companies like Bluebird are doing with beta thalassemia and hemophilia, and RegenXBio is doing with other things. And there's a whole bunch of companies out there that are addressing these single gene disorders, because that is almost just embarrassingly obvious application of this technology, and it's really, really practical. I think all those companies are going to be successful, and they're going to create a huge amount of value, because these 7,000 monogenic diseases are somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion of palliative treatments in the healthcare system right now. Think about moving that to cures instead, improving quality of life. This is just immense. Our lead candidate in there is phenylketonuria. We have something that we just found out that it's within the therapeutic index of the drug that we just developed to cure phenylketonuria. And that is a devastating disease where people cannot metabolize animal proteins and phenylalanine. It leads to organ damage and nerve damage, but also long-term, because you're not processing phenylalanine, you end up with a whole bunch of mental disorders that progress over time through depression, schizophrenia, and then finally suicidal.
How many people
thought.
in the country would have that disease?
Right now, there's about 20,000 people in the United States, about 50,000 between the U.S. and Europe. It's a small disease.
So this would be considered an orphan drug?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's going to get some benefits of being an orphan drug, but it's a high value, right? Because you're spending a ton of money on these people, and also they're not productive. Once they get schizophrenia, they can't work any longer. So they become a real burden. Then the last part of the platform that we have is immuno-oncology. And recently we received numerous patents. We've got 2 so far, and we've already heard that we have 2 more that are granted. So we're waiting for the ribbon copies to arrive, that give us ownership over the stimulation of gamma delta T cells for the therapy of epithelial solid tumors. Now that's a mouthful, but every solid tumor that you have heard of is probably in the epithelial range. So it's breast, prostate, lung, pancreas, liver, ovarian, colon, head and neck. I mean, these are a lot of deadly cancers. Well, it turns out that we can stimulate the cells that naturally surveil for those cancers and are what are keeping you cancer-free right now, because the small occurrences of these cancers occur all the time, but they're wiped out by this gamma delta T cell population. Well, we can stimulate those gamma delta T cells to flush out these epithelial cancers at 300 to 600 times their normal rates. And we do that by just treating one primary tumor with a viral vector that reprograms some of the tumor cells to emit a stimulatory molecule that excites this population, trains them, recruits them, and proliferates them in a very, very safe way. So they do what they do, which is to exquisitely, selectively eliminate only malignant cells using their NK receptors, but we can make them do it so much faster that they can now wipe out a whole solid tumor. So anyway, that's the third part of our platform, is we think we might have a whole pipeline of immuno-oncology drugs coming off of that one invention. And by the way, we have a lot more in that space that we're still developing, patenting right now, that we think we can broaden that out even further.
I think some of the entrepreneurial biotechnology CEOs and leaders that are listening are going to ask the question. You have three promising areas, all extremely exciting. You're an emerging biotech company. How does the CEO prioritize where the limited resources that all of them take significant funds? How do you determine where do you place your energies and your priorities when you have three exciting areas all coming to fruition at one time?
So the basic strategy is this space is going to be huge, and anybody that can survive in this space is going to do well. And I think that my fellow biotech CEOs would probably agree with that. And they all have their own strategies for staying alive and growing. And some of those ones are, like I was alluding to earlier, maybe that they got a boatload of money from a VC and that's going to get them through to milestones that'll get them to an IPO, and then they have a sustainable model. Mine's been a little bit different. And so what I had to do is to say, what is the shortest way to sustainability and to fit everything into that strategy? And once we decided that this technology was ready for prime time, in other words, that it was ready for the clinic, we looked at our entire portfolio of drugs, and we had like 14 in the pipeline at that point. We had to say which ones are the high probability ones to make it into the clinic, and then which ones are in the lead, and then how are we going to spread the money across those projects. And it turned out, whether it was good planning or just, serendipity again, that HIV had the shortest path to a clinical success, and that the cost of that was within our ability to raise the money. And the other ones took a back seat to that, but they weren't damaged because we could still progress PKU at a reasonable pace, and we could see doing an IND for that in 2019. So IND for HIV in 2018, maybe early 2019, with human trials starting in 2019. IND for PKU could happen organically within that same funding range because it didn't get into the zone where it started getting expensive until late 2019. And the same thing with immuno-oncology. The discovery part of this is relatively inexpensive compared to the clinical. And I think what a lot of people made the mistake of making discoveries and creating drugs on top of a fairly narrow foundation that wasn't really matured and solid, and got into the very expensive clinical phases very early on, even before this industry was really ready for the clinic. And I saw a lot of companies come before me that I thought had a really great idea, but just went a little bit too early. And so that's how we did it. And HIV, it looks like kind of a bowling pin strategy. So HIV could turn into a very valuable asset by showing first human efficacy. And at that point, of course, a pharma company would be interested in this, and then we would have sustainable funding where a PKU clinical trial would seem cheap to us. And by the end of that, a human trial in immuno-oncology will even seem cheap to us. So that's what we're hoping is the future for the company, and so far it looks like it's on track.
Congrats on the serendipity and the management of your portfolio decisions at this point. But you keep mentioning funding through everything we talk about. The company's 11 years old. A lot of companies never make it to 3, 4, 5 years old. You've made it through 11 years. And you've progressed your pipeline through that same process. But you've had an unusual funding strategy compared to some other people that I've talked to in this industry, Jeff. Yeah. Talk a little bit about, the founding of the company and then the funding strategy you've used to get to where you are today.
So I was lucky in that as a result of my career in Silicon Valley, I had the initial seed capital for this company. And I and my family put in about $1.5 million before we started attracting any other money. And then the first money that we got was grant funding from NIH, because who was leaning forward on cutting edge technologies? Scientists. And they were reviewing things and saying, yes, this has value even if it doesn't turn into something commercial. And they had the ability to take those kind of risks. You wouldn't see that in the VC community or even the standard investor community. Now, it changed.
Were those SBIRs or were they RO1s or what kind of grants?
Well, all the grants are good. Ours were all SBIRs.
Okay, great.
And they turn out to be high probability grants. Mm-hmm. And, once you learn the system, you can get some reasonable money out of that. And it got us through the really lean period. Because
as long as you meet your milestones, too, they like people that actually produce what they say they're going to.
Yeah, they like a report at the end of it. But
right.
The SBIRs, they don't necessarily look at them, especially phase ones. They look at those as very, very high risk deals. And then if it works out, you might be eligible for a phase 2, and that could be $1 million or $2 million. So there's a lot of value in SBIR. And guess what? SBIRs are handed out by organizations that largely reside in the BioHealth Capital Region.
You're
so
right.
Another little pitch for the BioHealth Capital Region for you there. So that was nice. And then after that, we got to the point where the story was starting to get traction with investors. And the investors that we found were the most amenable to this were the ones that were really impact investors. So they had 2 reasons to invest in the company. Sure, they might make a lot of money, but also it was the right thing to do because I could espouse and sort of illustrate a future that they wanted to be part of, that they took personally, that they made an emotional connection to our journey. And it gave them a second reason to deploy capital on top of the fact that we could tell a financial story that if we're right, the returns on this would be tremendous. And I had investors in the early days who said, this is going to be my Microsoft investment because they had friends that had put $70,000 into Microsoft and now it was worth $70 million. Right. And they wouldn't shut up about it at the club. And these people needed a story like that.
Right.
And so we got those people and we got other people who put money in and they even said to me, it may be a long time till we get our money back and some profit on this, or we may never get it back, but we still think it's the right thing to do. Now as we get closer and closer and more visibility on a financial endpoint, on a milestone that is a liquidity event for these people, we're not only have those sort of folks investing in the company, but we're starting to get the people that are really just focused on the dollars. So we're not at this point yet, but we're just starting to talk to these people. And these are the crossover investors. They need to have good visibility on a liquidity event. And we now have that. And we're starting to present data to them and present the story to them. And we think we can attract those players as well. But even prior to the start of that first institutional round, we never took it on a VC, and we've raised $20 million because this is a revolutionary technology that seems to be worthy of people's play money that are in the investor space. And so they can look at this as part of their high risk, high return portfolio. I never thought it was as risky as they did because I had this vision for it and I really believed that this was going to work the way that we said it was going to work. But they could also see that it wasn't impossible and it met the bar for them to go ahead and spare that kind of cash. And there was actually a fair bit of it around there, and it's the one thing that unfortunately I have to say that's not the best thing about the BioHealth Capital Region is this is not a place has a high level of risk capital, not like Silicon Valley where you can't throw a rock without hitting a millionaire who made all his money off of either his stock options or founding a company or whatever. These people have, in Silicon Valley, they have a high tolerance for risk. In the BioHealth Capital Region, not so much. But hey, you don't have to stay here. And what does the BioHealth Capital Region got to offer? Well, there's the Maryland Biotech Tax Credit, which was hugely attractive to high net worth individuals all over the country. And so we were able to go out and present this story all over California, down in Florida, throughout the Midwest, and around Maryland. And we ended up attracting $20 million of high net worth capital.
I would say that I congratulate you because most people that go through this pathway, and if you look at it, you always hear all these presentations about what's the Innovation Valley capital of death. You have family and friends, which you started with. You go with non-dilutive SBIR monies or other federal funds. You just go into angels, high net worth individuals Generally, if a company's able to get $2 or $3 million through that segment, they've done extremely well. But then they hit the wall, and then they're going to need that $5 million to $10 million pre-Series A money for the venture capital. You've been able to go through that paradigm with about $20 million in capital, which is 4 to 5 times more than most entrepreneurs do. It's highly unusual, and it must be to the storytelling and the quality of your pipeline and technology, Jeff.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that that's not an unreasonable way to present this. I think that I have done a good job of articulating this incredibly bright future in gene and cell therapy. I think that I even managed to articulate that this is a great region to develop things like this and that the opportunity is immense. And I think I have pulled in an unusual amount of money for exactly what you said. And I think it goes back to a problem I've had my whole life, and that is that I don't know what I don't know. And I don't know what I'm not capable of. And I'll tell you, there were plenty of people who said this isn't the right way to do it. And when you're still at a $10 million market cap, you've got to convince a VC to come in, or you're never going to make it through this valley of death. And they might have been right, but I didn't know that they were right. And so I headed this direction anyway, and I love this stuff so much. I just never get tired of talking about it, and as a result, I just keep meeting people who keep supporting it, and it added up to this number. And I think we're going to make an unbelievable return for those folks. And in the meantime, we've left our hands somewhat free to pursue where the science takes us. And as a result, we've gotten these amazing discoveries like this immuno-oncology asset of stimulating gamma delta T cells, which is going to turn out to be, potentially world-changing. But we never had to focus too early before the science was ready for that focus. And we never had to meet the agenda of people that have a certain time frame over which they have to show a payout for a particular fund. And so it's been, once again, serendipitous that just came together, and my tendencies just happened to match the realities that emerged, and we somehow made it through.
Now, you talk about crossover funders, and that's really the next phase is going to require more sophisticated investors. Not that the people who have invested today are not sophisticated. It's just that they're not formal institutional investors as you've defined it, which will really define the next direction for you from a financing standpoint. We're going to come back in another couple months and talk to you about what that strategy has evolved into, because I'm sure that it's going to be another interesting chapter in the company. So I'm going to leave funding go for a second and focus on a few other things. One is that I didn't know you or hear about the company until a couple years ago. But it seems that you're ever present right now within the region and in the press. So when did you make the decision to actually focus on storytelling in your own backyard to the same stories you were telling outside of the region and get more active within the BioHealth Capital Region?
Well, we decided to do that about 2 years ago, about when you heard of us. My feeling was that evangelism was always a core tenet of how we were going to grow this company. And I was doing as much of it as I could, and I needed to raise more money. And so I needed to amplify that, and we had to do it through social media and through PR and through developing more relationships with people that we could touch more often, which would be locally here. And also we were at a point where we merited their attention. And it's been remarkable that, again, the timing has been good, as that this whole thing is taking off in this region, that it wasn't just that I had a good story to tell around here and that we made a strategic decision to go ahead and spend more time telling it from just a PR standpoint and to the general public and to Maryland at large, but that a lot of the key opinion leaders and a lot of the movers and shakers, like yourself, Rich, were ready for it, that the timing was right, and that they turned around and looked at what we had to say and saw the trajectory of this whole market, and that they embraced it. And it's very powerful that you would be willing to have me into your studio to go ahead and talk about this, because this is going to get to a whole new audience, but it is it is the right timing for this, and I hope that it's of interest to your audience. And I know that it is very powerful for us because the expectations that we're setting in the market with this story create a vacuum in which this technology can come out into. And we're right around the corner from an HIV cure. We're not that far. We're only a couple of years away from something that might make a huge difference in cancer. It's time for the public to understand what's coming and to be excited about this future and to start expecting it and to start creating the demand for this the same way that they did for the personal computers when that was all the rage.
So with all of the excitement you have and the passion you have, Jeff, what do you see as the greatest challenges for a biotechnology entrepreneur right now? Where do you see the major gaps that you need to fill? And if I used to have a VC in a company I was running when I took a health IT company public, he'd call me every Friday night and he didn't want to know everything that was going well with the company. He said, "Rich, what are you losing sleep over?" So do you ever lose sleep over anything now, or what do you worry about most for AGT as you go forward, Jeff?
I think that most of the technological risk has been taken care of. And so all of my worries have to do with financing. And I believe that since we have raised $12 or $13 million over the last 12 months, and we only really need about $10 more million to get to a huge liquidity point, that my confidence level is pretty high that we'll be able to continue to raise at that rate and see ourselves through to first human efficacy in HIV, and that milestone will bring us to either an IPO or to a license agreement or to a takeout of that drug that will give us sustainable funding for everything else. So what could get in the way of that, and what do I lose sleep over? It's really a massive failure in the financial markets. I know this sounds crazy, from war, from meltdown of the economy because of just loss of confidence and, some sort of major adjustment on Wall Street and trade wars. I mean, there's lots of reasons, right, why something like that could happen. I believe that there's, plenty of window left on this very positive economic momentum that the country enjoys right now. And I also know that there's not anything I can do about it personally. So I don't actually lose sleep over it. I find myself waking up in the middle of the night. I'm having talks like this with key opinion leaders like yourself, or I'm giving a talk somewhere, or I'm explaining the technology, or I'm just out there advocating. And so I think that I just spend all my time just kind of renting the maze in my sleep and getting prepared for the next day and just being excited about going out there and talking about something that I'm really passionate about.
I think it's a great philosophy because I always tell my children, focus on the things you have some control over. And you mentioned a whole bunch of things you have no control over.
Yeah.
So if you focus on the business and the things you have control over in guiding this business down the future, it's a much greater chance of succeeding.
I think so. And it's not that we don't have crises, and every once in a while you have to hunker down and figure out how are we going to solve this problem that could be a serious issue for the company. That's just normal growth of a company. But the big things, the big trends are beyond our control, and the basic shepherding of this company and incremental growth from day to day, week to week, and month to month is absolutely possible, and that's what we focus on.
So what can the BioHealth Capital Region and BioHealth Innovation do to help support you to a greater degree?
Well, you're doing it already. I really appreciate that you are helping me to get the message out through this medium, and I hope it'll turn out that other people listen to this and they might even call us and because they're interested in our mission. And it's an old girlfriend said to me one time, and I'm married now, so this is ancient and totally unimportant person in my life, but she did say something that was really interesting, and that was, everybody can do something for you, right? And that's what's true about a revolution in healthcare like this, or any type of revolution, is that everybody's part of it. And so that's one thing that you're already doing. What else can you do? Keep introducing me to people. I mean, you're a mover and shaker, Rich. And every time I go to some place where all the people that I want to meet are in attendance, turns out you're there too.
Oh.
So, and this is another reason why we just started to really focus on Maryland, is that there's a lot of really great people here who have all different types of talents that can come into all different functions in this company, whether it's as employees or investors or in just donating good ideas or even just donating their enthusiasm for what we're doing. And that's empowering. So, that's what you and the BioHealth Capital Region can do for us.
And lots of many people that are helping to build the region. So it takes a village, they say, right?
Absolutely.
And our village is starting to materialize in a way where people are collaborating, connecting, and finding ways to cooperate with one another.
They call it the ecosystem, and I see that is really evolving here in a very positive way. I think something special is about to happen here in this region.
I agree with you. But it takes companies like yours to make that pop happen. So,
well, thank you.
We've been speaking with Jeff Galvin, CEO and founder of American Gene Technoloogies. Jeff, thanks for coming on BioTalk. It's an exciting story and one that we're going to continue to monitor. And we'll probably try to get this released within the next 2 weeks. And I think there'll be a lot of people that are new to learning about AGT. And if somebody wanted to learn about your company and your website, what would that be?
American Gene, obviously spelled GENE.com. And that should get you to everything that you want. We have, of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter and all those places, and we'd love to have you following us. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll get progress updates on all of these different platforms and projects. And that should do it.
Great. Jeff Galvin, thanks for being on BioTalk.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.